Let's talk supply chain. So let's start with some introductions. Martin, can you let us know who you are and what you do at CargoWise?
Sure, Sarah. My name is Martin Hespeler. I've been with CargoWise and WiseTech Global for the last 6 or so years. I'm currently responsible for the warehouse products that we have, of which there are 5 at CargoWise and WiseTech. And internally, I'm known as the domain owner of these products, and really glad to be here today.
Great. I'm glad to have you. Now, Graham, introduce yourself, but also introduce your company. Is it AWA Logistics? And sort of give us an overview of what you do.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, AWA is abbreviated for American Worldwide Agencies. We're predominantly an American-based export agent with offices ranging from Pago Pago in the Pacific all the way across to New York. So there's no one with further scope in the American territories than we do. So we've been around for just over 12 years, and I'm the CEO of the enterprise, and really lucky to have a great team around me facilitating what we do for our customers and partners.
Amazing. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. So I come from a logistics background. I was in logistics for almost 20 years, but I was mostly on the import side. I really didn't have a lot to do with exports, although I feel like I really should have. I kind of missed out on the action. So we'll get into that and talk about that a little bit later. But the pandemic and the e-commerce boom really highlighted flaws across the industry. And when people didn't really understand why they couldn't just get more toilet paper, I mean, the complex issues of warehousing and inventory really came into the spotlight. So what has been the traditional approach to warehousing? Martin, let's start with you.
Sure. Well, traditionally, when there were no disruptions, as we have recently experienced, it was business as usual. You'd have manufacturers or you'd have importers bringing product into the countries, and they would go to distribution points, which would be your warehouses, and those would go through various ways of performing fulfillment operations. Even today, we still see lots of companies that do that manually. They receive orders manually, they pick orders manually, they ship orders manually. But over the last 25, 30 years, we've seen more of a move into automation, where we've seen RF scanning being utilized for tracking inventory accuracy. We've seen a move towards some automation when it comes to processing, picking in orders, like pick-to-light systems and things of that nature. So the traditional methods are sort of in the rearview mirror, shall we say, a lot now. And we're moving quite quickly with technology to provide greater visibility to inbound orders, customer requirements, SLAs, KPIs. All those aspects of the industry are being closely watched and monitored for lots of reasons today.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, the change in technology is happening so quickly. I was talking to somebody the other day. You can't really have a plan past 6 months because everything is changing so quickly. And you mentioned, AI, machine learning. I recently had a chance to dance with a robot, and it was something that I've always wanted to do. And so I feel like we're going to have more of that, hopefully, in the work environment and the warehouse environment, just to keep everybody, dancing and happy.
Well, that's accurate. It's in the years past, when we spoke to operations directors, VPs of distribution locations, they would talk about, how do I reduce my labor cost? That was a big thing. I mean, labor, a lot of manual processes and increased labor. Since the pandemic, the conversation has shifted dramatically to more, how do I optimize? And because labor is not readily available anymore, and I hear more and more from CIOs and chief operating officers in these large logistics companies, provide me with technology that has me less dependent on labor, to your point of, robotics and things of that nature and automation.
Yeah, and I also heard some of the retention strategies as well as around gamification, making it a little bit more fun, the environment more fun, so we can keep the teams that we need and also have them working with that technology that we're going to be implementing. Now, Graham, let's talk about some of the disruptions, right? I mean, they've impacted everything, right? They've sparked a lot of change, which Martin just spoke about. So what does our current post-pandemic logistics environment look like, particularly when it comes to that warehouse management piece?
I think that's a really interesting point, and we're really in a flux. As Martin said, the industry has changed, but the labor force has also changed, and that's the biggest thing that we're seeing with automation is we're being driven by the labor. A lot of the younger people coming into the industry are work from home and millennials. They don't want to be in the office or a facility, but that's the nature of warehouse. And we're really seeing challenges to get them back in the facilities to do the work that has been traditionally done. And that's one of the drivers that we're seeing to drive the use of technology, robotics, systems, scanning into. I know one of the big things that we do is all of our exports now we scan in and out of containers in and out of ULDs to provide us better management, and that's all using the CargoWise platform.
Yeah, absolutely. So many different technologies and ways to be able to use it. It kind of gets a little bit overwhelming for a lot of supply chain professionals, right? Supply chain leaders who are leading those teams and just trying to figure out what's going to work for them, what's not going to work for them. How do I pick the right partner to help us optimize and facilitate some of those efficiency, but also support and empower the teams as well that are there?
You have to really be out there looking, understanding what is available, and that's a huge part of it. I was down at another facility here at LAX last week and saw robots loading ULDs onto aircraft for export and optimizing load plans for freighters.
Wow.
And that's the first time I've seen that. FedEx, UPS sort packages by robotics and barcode, but I actually hadn't seen robotic hands go and pick cargo, put it on a specific ULD, and have 5 and 6 ULDs there building up. That's the next level. These
Wow.
things are reality now. They are in play in select locations, but it is the future. We have to be embracing the future, or we're going to be left behind.
So let's talk about that a little bit because I think we are still dealing with somewhat of a dated infrastructure, right? So, what are some
100%.
of the biggest challenges that logistics providers are facing right now to get through that dated infrastructure and get more into the technology and sort of that robotic option that's going to optimize? Graham, I'm going to start with you and then I'm going to go to Martin.
Look, we really are seeing a leader by the Amazons, the FedExes, the UPSs. They are driving the larger logistics companies to provide the visuality and the reporting to the customers. Everyone gets an Amazon package every single day almost. I know my wife does, but you really look and see, you click on a button or you get an update, you know where it is. You see a picture of it on your porch.
Mm-hmm.
That is a level of reporting and information that our clients as logistics customers want to see.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have the visuality there. We're able to do that with the systems and process we have now, and we're continuing to evolve that. But it's all about the data that goes into the system. I know I tell my team, if it's not in the system, it's not done. And
Uh-huh.
that's the reality of it. And automating these processes and managing by exception is
Mm-hmm.
critical, because you can no longer go into every file, into every shipment and update it. It really has to be exception management and managing by the process. And
So you bring up a really good point, right? Because when we think about, last mile deliveries, we think about it going to a consumer. But you just mentioned a logistics customer. Everybody's a logistics customer these days, right? Your
Right.
wife on a daily basis, any consumer that's buying a product and getting it delivered, everybody's a logistics consumer. And so what that means for our mindset as logistics providers is that we need to be able to be flexible and grow that mindset to understand that it's not just our world that we're living in anymore. It's being driven by those logistics customers or those consumers. Martin, what do you think?
I totally agree. And Graham's comments were right on track, and so were yours. What we saw happen a lot, like for instance, when we talk about the Amazon package, a lot of people have this perception that every one of those packages comes from an Amazon distribution center. That's not the case. The case really is a lot of our customers are actually fulfillment centers that Amazon is using for last mile delivery and to optimize actually their freight costs and reduce those costs and get them onto your porch. we also see that, and Graham talked about the visibility. Surely there's visibility that then that subcontracted 3PL needs to provide with their systems, either back to Amazon or to the client, the consumer, so that they know where their packages are, what time, and when they can expect them. The flip side of that too is that once the package gets there, what happens on the reverse?
Right.
Now many companies are dealing with the reverse logistics component, which has been a nightmare, quite frankly, for decades. I mean, you can think about just secondary market type items coming out of a drugstore chain that suddenly, needs to go and put them on the secondary market. It's reverse logistics, and there's components to that. Today, my wife will send back those sneakers and she doesn't like them. She took a walk in them. They're no good. They go back. And the bottom line is, what happens to them? You need systems in place that can not only track the goods on their return, but do it effectively, efficiently, with automation, so it can be received back in, it can be refurbished, placed back into stock, and be sent out to the next consumer, and visibility throughout that whole process. It's very, very important. Otherwise, you're bleeding money.
Well, and the reality of it is that every single piece of, or a product is capital.
Exactly.
It's capital when it's either moving from overseas and coming to your warehouse. It's capital sitting in your warehouse. It's capital when it's delivered to the customer. It's capital sitting in that customer's house before it's being returned. And then it's capital sitting back on that shelf to get
exactly
or whatever that looks like. And so a lot of folks don't actually realize how much money is moving around in that particular product for that particular organization. And so not only is the warehousing process making that optimized and more efficient, but the last mile, and then like you said, the reverse logistics. Listen, I ordered something at Christmas from a big retailer that I will not name. It sat in my house for 8 weeks until they could get me a return label. 8 weeks. Like, think about the capital that was just
absolutely
laying around my house. And I was like, don't you guys want this back? So there's a lot of things to be said when it comes to optimizing, making things more efficient, making sure that your warehouse management is set up for all of this, because it can't just be set up for things going out. It's got to be set up for things coming in. And what is that plan?
That's correct. You're 100% accurate.
And one of the big items that we're starting to be seen and managed on is opportunity cost.
Yeah.
We haven't returned or delivered in a certain KPI. What is that lost opportunity cost?
Right.
And the customers now just aren't looking at the freight spend, looking at the delivery cost, but they're looking at the time in transit that they have committed. And what's that opportunity cost or the lost sale costing them as a company?
That is so true. I mean, think about that item that stayed at my house for 8 weeks. How many other times could it have been sold in that period of time? I mean, that's such a good point.
Yep.
All right. So in the previous episode with Stephen and Vincent, we talked about cross-border e-commerce, some of the challenges and opportunities. And within that, we touched on some businesses keeping inventory on the southern border and the cost-saving potential there. But that is really just a small part of why thinking about warehousing from a cross-border perspective is so important. Talk to us about why evolving that traditional approach to warehouse management is so critical, specifically when it comes to ensuring, logistics providers are cross-border adept. And I'll go into a little bit of my experience with that. Especially in Canada, there's a lot of organizations that have warehousing in Vancouver and Toronto. And now we're talking about mini warehouses, right? We're talking about dark stores that are doing some of the fulfillment. These are just some of the things that are coming out of that traditional approach and pushing the boundaries. Martin, what do you think?
I think you're bringing up a very important and valid point here. We do business with a lot of organizations that handle cross-border goods, obviously here at WiseTech and with our CargoWise solutions. And the emphasis that I place when I'm speaking with a client or a prospect that either has one or none of our modules implemented or using them, I talk to them a little bit about, carrying costs, visibility, and all these things boil down to, where are my goods? At what place, at what time, where are they in the process? So, how do you have the knowledge within the data, which is in the master data that Graham touched on earlier, that you can extract what's most important to you? So if I have goods sitting south of the border, and I want to bring them into the US for fulfillment purposes based on timing, is it best to place them in the free trade zone in the FTZ first and then go through clearance processes? Or is it best to just clear immediately and fulfill the next container for forwarding to another market and another distribution point? So these are the things that really start empowering the operations folks within the logistics organizations to be most effective. And that's all driven by data. We're very strong components of the master data here and how we manage that and provide visibility, not just to the logistics organization, but I like to talk about the customer's customer. So Graham's customer, what we want to achieve is that people go to Graham and say, are you using this solution? Because we've heard we can see end to end and have end to end supply chain visibility for my goods leaving Hong Kong and landing in Long Beach and then heading to DFW. That's the trick. And when you can provide that visibility to both the logistics company and their customer, it's extremely powerful.
Well, and that data is really important also when we think about where we want to place our product, right? A lot of times we're thinking, or retail organizations or organizations that have product to sell are thinking, where is my customer? Where do I place that warehouse? And going back to what Graham said earlier about opportunity costs, if I'm this far away from the customer and it takes that much longer to get there, what opportunity costs am I giving up? And all of that data is going to be able to help your customer be able to figure out what that looks like, where the product needs to be, how close does it need to be to the customer, which fulfillment center does it need to be in, right?
Very true.
Graham?
Yeah, correct. And our visibility is critical. A lot of our partners as a freight forwarder are on CargoWise, over 50%.
Wow.
We're able to get real-time data on when cargo is arriving at a destination, is checked in at an airline, is picked up at the port, and is unpacked and made available, and our customer take delivery. And we're able to see that real time in CargoWise, which is a critical part. We're able to give our customers monthly KPIs for outturns on availability on cargo going international, which is exactly what others do in the FedEx and UPS world.
Yeah.
Going back to the southern border, and I think it's even more critical with the cross-border e-commerce now, and I was down in Mexico recently, and you can't find a facility down there that's coming online in the next 4 years. Everything's scooped up. And
Wow.
that is going to be even more critical with the tariffs that are now coming in for foreign made goods. And we're starting to see, as we saw in Vietnam and Cambodia in the early 2000s, we're seeing a lot of these Chinese and other manufacturers move production to Mexico and other Central American countries to get access to this market and to avoid and not have some of these additional duties and taxes. Some are 25%, 60%. It's more efficient to have these factories and production established here, say they are closer to the market.
Yeah. I mean, one thing that you said around Mexico is that it's all kind of scooped up now. And so it's going to take some time for other people to be able to get into that market as well, right? And I think also labor comes into a bit of a play when we think about Mexico as well. Is there enough people to facilitate what we're going to need in Mexico as well? So lots of things to think about within the next 4 years. If you can't get a facility within the, right now, and it's going to take 4 years to get there. But let's go back to what you were talking about around global. I want to sort of talk about that because CargoWise isn't just thinking about cross-border from Canada to the US or US to Mexico. They're thinking about creating that global solution. Can you talk about how you're creating like a highly integrated and capable global solution? And why is thinking on this global scale so important? So Graham, I want to know from you first why that's so important, and then we'll talk to Martin about the CargoWise solution.
Well, I guess from my point of view, as you mentioned on your last podcast, it's all about the data. And we're seeing that even more and more and more on a daily basis, that the shippers, the consignees now have to have their tax numbers on file with local authorities in every country. How do you have to pre-file manifests? And that to us is a critical thing. Without these items in a system, in a location, that can transmit electronically to multiple countries, to multiple different systems, we can't move the cargo. And
Right.
having a database and a resource that allows us to not only have this easily accessible, but in the correct format that's transmitted is critical. Without this, we couldn't be moving cargo on the scale or scope that we are. And that's a critical factor these days, that coming from China or shipping to China, you have to have your tax numbers on file for the shipper, the consignee, for the freight forwarder as well. And to have this data built up, to have it accessible, we can do a 20, 30 line console and have all that data pre-populate and flow through. So all the authorities, so the compliance matters are completed. And that is key these days. Compliance really is a huge part to our business.
Yeah, those rules and regulations that keep changing, right? They're a little bit pesky and everybody's got to stay on top of them. So how do you do that without technology? I mean, I used to watch the export department with this huge book and I can't remember what it was called. They would have to manually go through it. I mean, nobody wants to do that anymore. Nobody doesn't have any teams left if that's what they have to do.
It's the tax book where you had to look up all the rates and the likes.
There you go. Yeah.
And I had a question the other day. Someone said, CargoWise is not the cheapest system out there, but they said, does it help your business? And my answer was yes, because without it, I couldn't keep all these regulations for all these different countries in line, in order, and operate efficiently.
And at a click of a button,
it automates. It automates what we do. And that is key these days.
Yeah. And so I think you bring up a good point too, is that everybody gets caught up in sort of ROI and it needing to look like an ROI when it comes to money back in your pocket. But ROI means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And you might not see a direct line of revenue, but for you, it helps keep the business more efficient, which means that you can actually go and sell more clients and bring more revenue in. And so ROI means different things to different people. So I'm glad you brought that up. Martin, what do you want to talk to us about around the CargoWise global solution?
Earlier, I'm responsible specifically for the warehouse solutions here, and they're all modules within a single tech stack that handle these different specific needs, whether it be, we look at contract logistics or we take a look at, just transit and freight forwarding type of options. But the strength of the WMS that we look at is it's actually the fact that we're in a tech stack that's integrated, as Graham said earlier, to all these different forwarding modules and BCN modules and different modules that we have. I mean, if I just paint a quick scenario for anyone that's in the logistics business, and I've got a warehouse that's in China and I have goods there that are now going to be shipped over to another one of my warehouses in my global estate. What's important to me? I need to know when the containers are leaving from China. It's most optimal to know when I'm going to be receiving those so that I can have the proper labor available, because we talked about that shortage earlier in the call or in our podcast that, we have significant constraints and challenges there as well. So the visibility of inbounds is very important. The ability for customers to log in if they're not technically advanced to do ASNs or EDI messaging, they can go into a customer-facing portal and be able to log an order or a request from anywhere in the world into the system so that it can be tracked, handled, and fulfilled properly. So when managing the global estate of warehouses, it's also about flexibility. When we hit constraints in particular areas or disruptions like we've seen here in Baltimore, that shuts down that operation completely. Now we've got to pivot. If I'm running warehouses in Jacksonville and in New Jersey, Edison, or in Elizabeth, New Jersey, and I want to augment what I've got going there, I can have a plan very quickly and be quite nimble to sort of pivot and move away from where there's a major disruption and challenge to meeting my customers and our internal SLAs and KPIs.
Well, and I think another opportunity around adopting sort of that global approach to warehouse management is sustainable growth and expansion. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. I would say that, what happens is that you go look at your estate of warehouses, and we talked earlier about market awareness. So where should I place my next facility? How should it be? What should I do? And that's related on a lot of different inbound factors from a data perspective. Who's the customer going to be? What's the velocity going to be for items going through that warehouse? What's the purpose of the warehouse. What do we really want to accomplish? Is it in an FTZ where we're just going to hold product for a long period of time to avoid payment and tax and those types of costs that we talked about earlier? But that's what you're looking at. Once you look across the estate and you see market opportunity in other areas, you can see, okay, it might make sense to expand in this other region or this other country because it would complement what we're doing or not able to do with our current estate of warehouses. So it goes back to your earlier point also on ROI. Look at it differently. ROI here might just be a revenue opportunity, and you're just basically turning on another,
Right.
warehouse in the system in another part of the world, which is very low cost in CargoWise to turn that on, and the value is realized almost immediately.
Amazing.
Versus a lot of the traditional solutions where now you've got to go through a full-blown implementation that might take months or years. Where in CargoWise, you're just going to set up an organization at that location, you turn on the warehouse, and it's basically up and running.
I like that, sort of like a one-click option. But you talked about free trade zones. One of the things that I think we also need to talk about is, a data around where to put your next warehouse. And that could come from free trade agreements as well.
Absolutely.
Right? What does that
Absolutely.
look like? What does it mean if I go and set up a warehouse in Canada versus the US? Let's just make it easy, right? Because in some respects, parking some product in Canada and moving it through the US has its advantages and its disadvantages. And having a system and a partner like CargoWise can really help you with that and sort of figure out not only how you get closer to the client, but also what makes the most sense of where you want to be putting that warehouse.
Absolutely. Because you can really review the data. Let's say you gave it a trial, Canada, US first, try it. Now you've got the data to do true analysis of what makes the most sense for your go forward strategy.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk a little bit more about that technology because it really has the potential to help us tackle the challenges, right? And realize the benefits that we've talked about so far. So, Graham, what's your perspective on how technology is helping logistics providers sort of navigate unpredictable global market forces? Because, it is kind of unpredictable right now.
It is, but it's really the technology's allowed us to continue to be competitive in the market, and particularly some of Martin's warehouse functionalities with transit warehouse that we've implemented in the last couple of years has really changed us from a manualized process and has really saved. I was speaking to my warehouse manager yesterday, and in particular on one very involved console trade lane we do, it's taken out 12 hours of pick time on one lane per week.
12 hours?
12 hours.
What are you going to do with those 12 hours, Graham?
Well, that allows us to be more competitive, have a better product. But we know in the warehouse where this product is. We know the location. We have a barcode scan. We scan the pieces into the location. We scan them out onto the console, into the airline unit or the container. It allows us, when we're doing, some of our consoles will have 70 lines of cargo. Some of those will have 25 pieces each. It really allows us to take out the checks and balance and the manual tally sheets that we just can't compete and use today. That's the reality. Is if you're relying on a warehouse person, no offenses to the warehouse person, to manually tick and sign every single box in and out, there's going to be errors. We've cut down our errors by 80%.
Wow, that's
by
a big
being
number.
able to use the technology that we now use on a daily basis. And it really has transformed what we do in the warehouse over the last 2 years.
And I think they're happier, right? Because nobody wants to, let's face it, nobody wants to make an error. Nobody wants to make a mistake. But think about how you feel when that happens. If you were to take that out of the equation, right? If you were to take that out of the equation, we talk about mental health, right? Whether it's business, supply chain, whatever. But just think about taking that out of the equation and it not being a possibility anymore. How much happier, how much more of a mental health, a life that we're giving back to our team members.
Yeah, and it's checks and balances, being able to have a true check and balance on every item in real time.
Yeah. Martin.
I would say that, I've spoken with many warehouse associates over a period of time, and you'll hear things like, I can't find it. I spend time running around. I have to look for a place to put this. I've had to put things in an aisle and then move them 5, 6 times so that other pickers could get it. When you take all of those disruptions and inefficient, old methods out of the equation, and you move that over to the technology where they're being driven by a system. And to your earlier point about make a game out of it, gaming. I've been in warehouses where they've got monster LCD displays at the ends of the aisles, and they're actually promoting how many lines and picks are happening, where the receipts are and everything. And each group of folks, they make a game of it. They can, have a challenge going, and it makes it exciting and more fun on a different level versus total frustration of, going through a pallet of cases and then trying to find a particular case to go ship to a customer for 30 minutes. What a total inefficient operation you have there, and really frustrates that warehouse associate so much to have to go through that.
Well, and to your point, okay, if anybody out there listening right now is ever asking your partner, your logistics partner, to help go and find your product, that shouldn't be happening anymore. As long as they are using the right technology and they are partnering with the right
That's
company.
right.
Okay. So ask yourself, how many times a month are you asking that question? Because I remember back when things were manual, and especially with the airlines, it happened weekly and they took
All the time.
days to find it. It's so frustrating. So frustrating.
Believe it or not, it's still happening today.
No.
Those are all the prospects. It's hard to believe, and I think, Graham, you could speak to this, to your competitors that are struggling because they don't have the technology.
But it doesn't need to happen. This is what I'm saying. If this is happening to you, you're not with the right technology. You're not with the right partner, because it shouldn't be happening to you ever. All right, Graham, I know you talked a little bit before about an example of talking to somebody when they asked you, what is it like working with CargoWise, the cost, that kind of thing. Can you talk to us a little bit about that journey that you've been on with CargoWise and AWA? What were your challenges? How did CargoWise help you tackle them? What kind of benefits or ROI did you see?
Look, we go about, the industry has changed dramatically. I remember when I was cutting export documents, and you mentioned you used to have a stack of documents.
Yes,
and we now, and I think the top line documents, we had one which was 6 pounds of documents go on one console air freight. Used to have to send a manual pouch. There was a ream of paper, faxing before then. Now it really is a paperless system. You don't have to send a pouch with documents. How much more environmentally friendly, how much processing time you're saving by being able to transmit these things electronically, not have to rekey data. The industry has dramatically changed. And I remember with CargoWise back then at WiseTech and Eagle Datamation, when they were back in the day, how this system has changed and evolved and is now very much an industry standard. I'm very lucky to have been on this system for over 20 years now. And it really has helped formulate what the young freight professionals know, and the language for most freight forwarders. And that really is a critical factor. And you said early on, Sarah, well, I was always in the import side. Imports is the same as exports, and it's the same system, it's the same language. You're just on the import side, you're entering or checking what's already been put in on the export side. So it's the same process, just reverse it. And the data is the same. It's just about learning and understanding the order that's put in. And with the system, it's a universal template. Once it's in there, it flows through, and that to me is critical. It's almost like learning to speak English, holding a conversation. That is now what the data represents in CargoWise, and what they've been able to do is truly amazing. From the forwarding side now into the warehouse and the trucking sides that they have, it allows us to have a effective communication process for all the data, and there is substantial there, and to make it clear, concise, and easy to read and understand.
Well, and you're bringing all the departments together, which is what I like. I
Right.
always say collaboration is the future of business.
Yeah,
And they've been a partner for you for a long time, but they've been
they
able
have.
to expand into various different areas that made the most sense for you and your business to be able to keep those customers, right? And keep that technology going to be
Yeah.
able to service those customers.
And we really felt a need 5, 6, 7 years ago. We weren't getting the service out of our warehouse partners. So we started a warehouse. That was a bolt-on system, as Martin said, to use their system and tools in our facility.
Hmm.
Over COVID, we had trucking challenges. So we went and got a few trucks. We used their tools to manage GPS tracking, PODs from devices that are
Mm,
facilitated through CargoWise. These are all items that, with very minimal training and setup, can allow a freight forwarder or partner to expand their business, but to
mm.
yet make it more inclusive, have visuality throughout the process, which is key.
And new revenue streams for you. I mean, I'm hearing all of that. And nobody's going to say no to a new revenue stream because of technology.
No, but it's not just a revenue stream, but it's delivering a service to the customers.
End to
You
end.
couldn't
Yeah,
find
you're
you
expanding.
couldn't find trucks back in, you couldn't
It's true.
find delivery vehicles, and I know even a transfer from our facility to the airport that's 5 miles away went up 400% overnight
Right.
in COVID. So we were
Crazy.
really forced to do that to allow us to continue to deliver products and service to our customers, and having a partner there that could expand rapidly and the likes there was critical to us.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Now we're winding down, and I want to ask you both one last question. So, as we look to the future, what are the key warehouse management trends that we should be paying attention to? Martin, I'm going to start with you and end with Graham.
Okay. Well, the way I view it from a strategic perspective for warehouse operators is that, make sure you've got the basic, technologies that are available today, lay that foundation, lay that groundwork, and then start looking at what makes the most sense for you as a next step. It really depends. Look, not every warehouse is a freight forwarder. Not every warehouse is a pure play, landside logistics company. It's different for everybody. But what I would suggest is that they take those fundamental basic foundations, build on those with the desire to get into really protecting themselves against those disruptions in the supply chain, the things that can happen like labor shortages and things of that nature. And you'll be able to achieve that through having data, master data management, which we're clearly a believer in over here, and also starting to look at how do I integrate to some of those robotics that you had talked about and autonomous vehicles, things of that nature. I think that it's very important to get your, business analytics and insights very well defined. I believe you should be looking at tools that'll empower the customer's customer to be more valuable in your partnership, to deliver goods and move goods around the world. And again, integrated solutions with a centralized data management is key. But I would say that on a level of that view, if you continue to do that, you'll be pretty successful in pushing cost out of your supply chain operation.
Amazing. So, Graham, last word. What trends should we be looking out for?
I think you have to be really forward thinking. If you're not looking for what's coming next year and the year after now, you're not with the right provider. I know for our roadmap we have a dimensioner, so automatically weighs and dimensions cargo coming in place this year. You have document recognition and electronic delivery of those items into the system. And that's really having a look at what are the next steps, what is your provider doing to allow you to be even more efficient, and not just road mapping the next 3 months, but really looking at the next 2 to 3 years ahead. Really, we're well into our 2025 planning now, and if
Wow.
you're not forward thinking like that, you're really being left behind.
Absolutely. And so if you want more information about global warehousing, CargoWise actually has a free global warehousing ebook, and you can check that out over at cargowise.com. Go and get your copy because they dive into these topics a little bit more. So, in an increasingly demanding and globalized market, large integrated global forwarders and logistics providers have struggled to keep up, with no truly viable solutions to meet their needs. Incorrect technologies, plus the complex problems of operating many different systems in many countries, in many languages, has been an almost insurmountable barrier until now. So CargoWise's warehouse suite allows businesses to create integrated ecosystems where data flows effortlessly between their warehouse, customs, and forwarding operations, providing end-to-end visibility, inventory management, and flexibility with its powerful but user-friendly technology. CargoWise positions brands to meet the dynamic needs of their clients and drive continued growth in the ever-changing world of logistics. So, did you have a guess at today's big question? Well, at the top of the show, I asked you, as a multi-billion-dollar sector, the warehousing industry has experienced significant growth over the past few years, thanks to the rise of e-commerce and increasing consumer demand for quick and efficient delivery services. But how much revenue did it generate in 2022? Well, it was a huge $34.6 billion with an average 2.8% annual growth in the US between 2017 and 2022. Well, thank you so much for everybody for listening, and a massive thanks to Martin and Graham for sharing all the amazing insights and for joining me on the show today.